I drank with a murderer. One night in the fall of 2017, I got off work at about 11 p.m. and went to the local bar by my house like I usually did for a few drinks before going home. When I got to the bar, there was only one other person in the bar playing a casino machine. Let's call him Steve. I ordered my drink and began chatting up bartender, a guy I got along well with. "Slow night?" I asked. The bartender told me that he had only 3 people in all night, including me. Shortly after, Steve walked up and cashed out a ticket for a few cents. He said something about losing his rent money before laughing and ordering a drink. Steve and I got to talking about nothing important, things like the weather and sports. At about 01:15 a.m., another guy had seen around the bar a few times before walked in and began playing the machines. I knew his name was Jimmy, but that was about it. I stepped outside to smoke a cigarette and the Steve followed me. Outside, he asked if he could bum a smoke. I gave him one, and we continued our conversation, which had changed about what I did for work and if I lived around the area. I told him what I did for work and lived only a few blocks away. Honestly, I thought nothing of it. When I asked him the same questions, Steve said that he was in between jobs and lived nearby. We walked back inside and the bartender called last call at about 01:30. I bought another drink and a 6-pack to take home. I also bought Steve a drink since he seemed like a cool guy. At about 1:40, I finished my drink and said goodbye to the bartender and Steve. As I was leaving, I heard the Jimmy yell that he had gotten into the bonus round on the machine. I got into my car and drove home. The next day, I went to work at about 2:30 p.m. When I arrived, I went into the locker room and began to put on my uniform when my boss walked in saying that he needed to see me in his office immediately. I followed him to his office, and when I entered, there were 2 detectives waiting. The boss told me that they needed to speak with me before leaving us alone in his office. I asked the detectives what was going on. One of them, let's call him Bill, showed me a picture and asked if I knew who it was. It was a photo of Steve. I told Bill that I had met him at the bar last night and asked what all this was about. Bill explained that that very morning, a man had been found murdered in a park not far from the bar I was at. Not just murdered, decapitated. Everything I remembered from the night prior, which I did. Bill then pulled out his laptop and showed me surveillance footage from the bar, which showed Steve and I speaking and smoking a cigarette. I gave Bill a rundown of what we were talking about as the video played. When video showed Jimmy walking in, Bill asked if I knew who he was. I told Bill that I had seen him around a few times at the bar, but had never spoken to him. Video showed me leaving the bar at about 01:45. Bill asked where I went next. I showed Bill video from my Ring camera, which showed me arriving home at 01:50 and not leaving until I left for work the following afternoon. Bill explained that it had been Jimmy's body they had found that morning in the park. He said he had an uncashed ticket in his pocket for $560 from the bar. Bill said when they had seen me on the camera, they had to interview me, and the bartender told them where they could find me. Bill also said that they had found Steve walking down the street a few blocks from the scene covered in blood. As it turns out, Steve was recently homeless and had a history of mental illness. When Jimmy won $560, he attempted to cash it out, but was unable to do so since the bonus round went past $100 and the bartender could get in trouble for cashing his ticket that late. The bartender had told Jimmy to come back the next day and cash it. Steve, having overheard that Jimmy had won a decent amount, had planned to rob him for it. Steve confessed that he followed Jimmy, who had walked to the bar, to the park near his house where he tried to rob him at knife point. When Jimmy fought back, he cut Jimmy's throat to take the cash, which he didn't have. Steve said he had cut off Jimmy's head with his knife as an attempt to conceal the body. According to Steve, when he realized that he wouldn't be able to hide it, he became scared and left it there. Steve pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 85 years in prison.